Uh-oh. Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays.
You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove. For all the latest Buckeyes news, analysis, reaction, and the best Ohio State community on the entire internet, head over to buckeyegrove.com or follow us on Twitter at Ohio State Rivals. Without any further delay, it's time to get unscripted. Broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Ma! We get some meatloaf!
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Ma! The meatloaf!
Good Monday, everybody. Welcome back to the Unscripted Ohio podcast. I am your engineer, your captain, your navigator, Kyle Lamb. We are brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com and also sponsored now, of course, by JFQ Lending. Thank you to JFQ again for coming aboard and patronizing and sponsoring the show. It is a great honor to be sponsored by somebody so eager, so willing to help the show out, and this gives us a lot of excitement about the future, and I'm very, very grateful for JFQ Lending being the new title sponsor of the show. I have Mark Gibler, Buckeye Grove recruiting analyst, coming up here in just a few minutes. We're actually going to talk some football, Ohio State football, the NFL Combine. We'll get into that. Jonah Jackson's transfer. Does Ohio State have anything else up their sleeve as far as grad transfer linemen? A lot of subjects I want to tackle with Mark. We'll get into just a little bit of recruiting. Not a lot of recruiting today, but we will talk about some upcoming visits here scheduled for Ohio State football this spring. So that'll be coming up here in just a few minutes with Mark. Little bit of basketball, just a few minutes here. If you saw the Ohio State-Purdue game over the weekend, I'm guessing you probably didn't see a lot of it because I have a hunch that most of you people probably turned the game off fairly quickly. Either some of you may have lasted into the second half, maybe by 5-10 minutes. Others probably canned it and called it a day early in the first half, because at one point in the first half, Ohio State got down by 28 points. And then in the second half, I think it got up to like 36, 38 points, something like that. It was not a pretty game. Of course, part of this can be dismissed by the fact that Caleb Wesson sat this game out with an indefinite suspension. Ohio State, of course, announcing his suspension on Friday. He will miss, it sounds, although Ohio State has not said exactly what the suspension is in terms of duration or in terms of what exactly it is for. I have a few hunches. I'm not going to talk about it. You can probably make your own guesses. It's not really important at this point. But what I can tell you is it sounds like he will miss the last two games of the regular season and be available for Ohio State to play in the Big Ten tournament. What does matter now is, Ohio State is still okay. I know people are freaking out about this. I'm telling you, Ohio State is in the tournament right now, and barring a total collapse of losing these next two games and losing the first game of the Big Ten tournament, as long as that doesn't happen, I think Ohio State will get in the NCAA tournament rather safely. I know people are freaking out about this, but you can't just say, well, they're not going to make the tournament, because it doesn't work that way. This isn't done in a vacuum. This is based on what other teams are doing in addition to what you are or are not doing. And let me tell you, there just are not other teams out there winning a lot of games. I mean, for as much as Ohio State has a problem, outside of those the quadrant one games that they played, which is top 30 at home, top 50 neutral, and top 75 on the road. Outside of those games, Ohio State has only lost a handful of times this year. They lost at Illinois, they lost at Rutgers, they lost at home to Illinois, lost at home to Syracuse, lost at Rutgers. There's a few losses on the schedule there, but they have not lost outside that quadrant one very frequently. So Ohio State is in good shape here. If they knock off Northwestern this week or Sunday home against Wisconsin, they're completely in. Don't even worry about it. It's a done deal. Now, if they lose these two games and then, go and play Rutgers or, whoever else they will play in the first round of the NCAA tournament or Big Ten tournament, which would be Rutgers right now, If they lose that game as well, then yeah, hey, there's going to be some restless moments sitting on the bubble there going into Selection Sunday. That could potentially be a problem. But if all goes well for Ohio State and they pick off just one win the rest of the season, then I think they're in the NCAA tournament. I really do. I just don't think there's any way they get left out as long as they pick up one more win before Selection Sunday. Whether it comes this week or next week, they'll be fine if they get one more win. You have my Kyle guarantee on that. They will be in the NCAA tournament with one more victory, regardless of where it comes in these next 2 weeks. So, Ohio State basketball, just when things were starting to go swimmingly, Justin Ahrens breaks out with these 29 points, and Ohio State suddenly looks like they could potentially be another team. Then Caleb's suspension comes along, and that really just hurts. They were not able to get anything going offensively. Not having that inside-out presence, being able to kick it in to Caleb Wesson inside and drawing all the attention that he draws from opposing defenses. They just don't have enough guys that can create their own shot to be able to afford to not have him on the floor in long periods of time. Ironically, they do play better playing small at times, but there are some teams that they're not going to get away with that. And Purdue, for as well as they were defending on the perimeter and taking things away, and my goodness, they were just hitting everything on offense. Purdue just wasn't missing in that first half. It was crazy how hot they were. So I don't even know that it mattered if Ohio State was playing well offensively. The way Purdue was shooting in that particular game, it just didn't make a difference. But hey, the Buckeyes have plenty of room for error here as long as they can win against Northwestern or win against Wisconsin or pick up a win or two in the Big Ten tournament. They are going to be in the NCAA tournament next weekend. Next Sunday, 1 week from Sunday, they will see their name pop up on the screen on the selection show. I can give you my word on that as long as they pick up at least one more win along the way. So Ohio State basketball, we'll see what happens at Northwestern and then closing out the regular season at home on Sunday with the Wisconsin Badgers.
It's time to go inside Ohio State recruiting and take a peek behind the scenes with Buckeye Grove recruiting guru Mark Gibler and his magical orb of wonderment. They said it couldn't be done, but he's outdone himself once more. Back for another recruiting roundup.
That's what I do. I drink and I know things.
Yeah, Mark is here for another roundup. We're actually going to talk a little more than just recruiting today. We're going to talk some NFL Combine, and, of course, we've got the Jonah Jackson transfer to go over. Mark, I appreciate you coming in for another lovely appearance here on the podcast.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a lot to talk about here the next few weeks. With practice starting this week, there are going to be a lot of visitors coming through, so should get pretty interesting. And obviously, the Jonah Jackson thing is definitely an important part of what Ryan Day is trying to get established here going into his first season.
Let's start there with Jonah. So Ohio State is getting pretty much the preeminent grad transfer target on the offensive line that they were exploring. Let me first start with Jackson because I have a few other ancillary questions that I would like to get into with him, coming to Ohio State next year. But what are the Buckeyes getting with Jackson? I know he was a captain there at Rutgers, and by all accounts, he was wanted by some of the heavy hitters, Oklahoma, Texas. So what are the Buckeyes getting, and can you tell us where Ohio State looks to fit him in the line next year?
Yeah, well, they're going to get some versatility there. He is capable of playing center, and right now going into spring football, I think the hope is that Josh Myers will prove to be ready for that role, and that Jackson could slot in at guard, probably opposite Wyatt Davis there. So my initial reaction would be left guard is the most likely spot for Jackson at this point. Again, that is based upon Wyatt Davis, building off the end of the season and solidifying the right guard position, and based off of Josh Myers being ready to take over center. but it's going to give him a lot of flexibility because, as I just said, Jackson could play center if for whatever reason Josh Myers is not ready to handle that or there's an injury. Can play guard, and it gives them the flexibility to move Brandon Bowen to tackle as well with him. So they've got this base, maybe 6-7 guys here now that they can move around. So it's going to give them a lot of flexibility.
So where is Ohio State now as far as grad transfers? I know some of the guys that they had been recruiting previously, it seems that they have called off, their visits and some of their interests, but there are still a few guys out there. I know the Georgia Tech guy, Parker Braun, they still seem to have some interest. So would Ohio State take anybody else? And specifically with Braun, what is the situation there?
Braun actually committed to Texas about an hour ago.
Oh, okay. So, well, okay then.
So he's going to be off, obviously. They were looking at R.J. Proctor. That visit was going to happen this weekend. That's off. So I think they're done. I mean, we'll see what happens here. I know that they kicked the tires early on Drew Richmond. That didn't go very far. So I think this is it. Maybe something could have been worked out with Braun in terms of redshirting and coming from Georgia Tech and kind of getting him acclimated to a more normal offense. But once they got Jackson, it kind of took away their real need, and it also kind of de-incentivizes another grad transfer to come and join the program, even if there was interest on Ohio State's end, just because, these grad transfers aren't coming in to not start. So with the numbers the way they are right now, I think it would be hard, even if there was some interest, I think it'd be hard to coax another grad transfer into the program at this point. Yeah,
that's kind of why I was perplexed at the reported interest with Braun at Ohio State, just because it just seemed unlikely you're going to get a grad transfer to transfer to some place where he would be redshirted and sit out another year. And lo and behold, of course, I guess that's kind of prophetic since he's now apparently committed to Texas. So it just goes to show that seemed to be an uphill climb, convincing him to do something like that.
Yeah, it just it doesn't make sense for the player. I mean, this is a money year for these guys. These guys are making business decisions. They're trying to find the best fit for really just a couple of months. Whatever's going to maximize their NFL value. And I'm sure Ohio State would like to add, or certainly wouldn't be opposed to adding another grad transfer body for competition and depth. That's going to be a tough sell.
So I want to switch gears. The NFL Combine, took place over the weekend, and there are a number of things that I would like to discuss, but I want to get your take on something I discussed early in the week. What is it? Tell me, please. And honestly, I'm open to reasons, but I'm not seeing it. Why would an NFL executive take Kyler Murray over Dwayne Haskins at this point? I honestly, I'm trying to be unbiased. I'm trying to be neutral. But when I see Dwayne Haskins and I watch Kyler Murray, it's not that Kyler Murray can't or won't be a great NFL quarterback. But if I had to take one of the two, what is it? Why is there so much hype right now for Kyler?
No, I mean, I'm with you. I think I don't know. I don't know that I would call Dwayne the safe pick. That might be overdoing it, given what we know about college starts and, needing those 20 to 25 starts or more and kind of what that has meant in the past. I don't know that Dwayne is necessarily the safe pick, but he's certainly a safer pick than Murray. This is going to come off more negative towards Murray than I intend it to be. So I'm going to try and walk it back after I say this, but what type of bizarro world are we living in when a quarterback measures in at 5'10" and people are rejoicing about this? Like, it's like the greatest thing in the world. I'm like, wait a minute here. So, okay, you may have expected him to come in at 5'9" or whatever, but he's still 5'10". I mean, even, guys like Drew Brees and Baker Mayfield and some of these other, I mean, they're 6 feet tall. I mean, maybe Russell Wilson isn't. I've stood next to Russell Wilson kind of indirectly. I was on the field at the Ohio State-Wisconsin game several years ago, and, maybe Russell Wilson at 6 foot is pushing it. But the fact that measuring in at 5'10" as a quarterback would actually cause this type of excitement around you just is total bizarro world to me. And now I'm going to walk back a little bit because, like I said, I do like Kyler Murray I think he's a tremendous football player. Certainly a dynamic athlete. I think better passer, both on the move, but better passer in the pocket than people give him credit for. Playing, behind some monsters at Oklahoma on that offensive line, some really big guys. So I think there's a path for him. I just I'm trying to wrap my brain around, though, a 5'10" measurement being a significant thing in terms of, just taking his stock to the next level. To me is kind of crazy.
Yeah, there was an interesting stat I heard. He actually had fewer balls batted down this year than Dwayne Haskins did. But there are a few obvious caveats there. Namely, they got him out of the pocket a lot more often than Dwayne Haskins was out of the pocket. So some of his throws were on the run and out of the pocket. And so you're not going to have nearly as many batted down in that situation. And also, you're not going to be able to do that as much in the NFL, I would assume.
Yeah, and I'd be interested in a little more of an advanced look than just the raw data in terms of number of passes batted down. I watched a good bit of Oklahoma this year, and maybe I didn't see the right games or whatever, but Ohio State kind of lived and died by the shallow cross this year.
Yeah.
With KJ Hill and Paris Campbell catching, a million balls between the two. And those little shallow crosses are ripe to be knocked away. I mean, Oklahoma to me has been more of a vertical, intermediate and vertical. I haven't seen them run quite as much of that stuff as Ohio State. So I don't know. That's just my memory and the eye test. I mean, the data could maybe prove otherwise. I'd be interested to see that. But certainly there's a lot of merit to how Murray makes a lot more throws out on the edge than Dwayne would.
Well, and Lincoln Riley's mama didn't raise no dummy. Certainly, he knows that, that's not going to be a strength of Kyler Murray at 5'9" or 5'10" or whatever his real size is. So, certainly they're not going to call those type of routes when that's not going to necessarily be conducive to, his skill set and, him standing in the pocket and trying to throw, like you said, shallow routes, like right over the middle with defensive linemen in your face.
Right. No, exactly.
To the surprise of no Buckeye fans or anybody that's watched Ohio State whatsoever, the wide receiver prospects showed up and showed out over the weekend. We had 3 Buckeyes in the top 8 in the 40 times, which aren't everything, of course, but the cone drills and all the other receiving drills that the receivers went through. Paris Campbell, Terry McLaurin, and Johnny Dixon all acquitted themselves very well. I want to start first. Where do you see the 3 of these guys going in the draft in April?
I could see someone rolling dice on Paris late in the first round. He's such an athlete. I can't imagine he's still on the board past the second round. That would be a surprise to me. I think I think McLaurin will be undervalued, or at least is at this point. Just because I think he's going to give you – I just think Terry's going to be in the NFL for 8 or 10 years. And even if that's just as a special teams guy and like a fourth receiver type of player, I just think Terry in the landscape of the limited roster sizes and everything is such a valuable player to an NFL team where he is going to be cheap. He's going to be able to play all the special teams, and he's going to be able to be out there as like a fourth receiver. So my value of Terry may be higher than most. So I expect him to go somewhere in the middle. I mean, as an Eagles fan, if Terry's there in round 5 or something like that, there's a round the Eagles don't even have a pick. So if they don't have a 5th round pick, don't kill me on this. But if Terry were there in like round 5 and it were my team and my team could add a receiver or something, I'd be thrilled to get a guy like that.
I'm on
the 5th. But,
Mark, I'm on the record stating a few weeks ago on Twitter, I think he's gone by pick 100.
I mean, how valuable is a 3rd round pick? I mean, that'd be about a 3rd round pick. I mean, that'd be early 3rd.
Yeah.
Or no, I'm sorry, that would be end of 3rd.
It'd be late 3rd.
Late 3rd. I mean, if you could tell an NFL exec that, pick 80 or something like that, they were going to get a guy who probably would never be better than their 3rd or 4th best receiver, but would play for them for 8 or 10 years and be one of their best special teams guys and be their 3rd or 4th receiver, I would have to think they would take that and be thrilled with a mid to late 3rd. So I mean, I'm a little conservative on that, saying by the 5th, but if you said Terry McLaurin in the middle of the 3rd round to whoever, yeah, sure, that makes sense to me. The Dixon one to me is the most interesting because, first of all, he, of the 3, his 40 time surprised me the most because I wasn't convinced he was faster today than he was his senior year of high school because of all the knee issues he's had. And certainly that isn't the case. I mean, that was it 4.41. Now I think he ran 4.51 the second time. So, I mean, there's some variance there, but he ran very well. I'm not a doctor, but I'm sure nobody of the 3 we've mentioned, nobody more than Dixon is going to have their medical history uprooted the way Johnny is compared to the other 2. And that's going to be, to me, that's a total wild card for me, is what that's going to turn up just with the injuries he's had.
Yeah. Dixon, obviously his medical history has been well documented, well discussed. And, an interesting subject came up on Twitter and, I think Dixon is somewhat, I'm going to set him aside because his injuries are a little bit different story than the other 2 that I want to discuss. But, somebody mentioned, had Ohio State had more of a pass-oriented system with a pass-oriented quarterback the last couple of years, that McLaurin and, Paris Campbell could have put up some monstrous numbers. But I think back, am I crazy here? I'm thinking back, to just even last year, and maybe it's me, but I seem to recall these guys were not anywhere near the receivers that we saw this year. McLaurin and especially Campbell both had the dropsies. McLaurin was a really good route runner, but couldn't always catch the pass when it was thrown to him. And Campbell, we know his route running and his hands were not very consistent or very trustworthy in the past. So I feel like these guys really made a huge improvement this year, and I think people forget where they came from just a year or 2 ago. It's a radically different set of receivers than what we saw in the past.
No, I'm mostly with you there. I think, look, I'm not a JT Barrett basher or anything like that. I think Haskins is a more receiver-friendly quarterback. I think the ball is generally delivered on time more often, and how they talk about delivering passes in the shooter's pocket from a point guard in basketball. I think the ball is generally delivered in a better spot where receivers can make plays after the catch, and their route isn't being disrupted with Dwayne Haskins. That being said, Paris Campbell and Terry McLaurin made tremendous individual strides in terms of their consistency of catching the football, and so I don't think you can discount either argument, but to completely dismiss the individual improvements those guys made, I think would be silly too. It was not simply the move from Barrett to Haskins. Paris had a real struggle catching the football for several years. This is going back 3-4 years, and he became much more consistent this year, as did Terry. And if you look at it, guys like Austin Mack and Benjamin Victor still have struggled a little bit with catching the easy ones with Haskins. So there's a level of individual responsibility that I think people are dismissing. That I think those guys have really dedicated themselves to improving and should be applauded for that. I don't think you can just. I don't think it's a black and white thing. I think there are. I think it's a little bit of both.
And the second part of that is it begs the question: would this improvement have come if Zach Smith were still the wide receivers coach? How much do you attribute to the change in coaching, or do you think that they were both, because of their talent and their work ethic, do you think both of them would have made this leap anyway, or do you think that the Hartline addition has really changed their mindset and their approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think Hartline's doing an unbelievable job. And I think, naturally when your room performs well, you do get some credit. I think he deserves some credit for this, but at the same time, he was there the year before, and I know he wasn't the primary receivers coach, but he was involved in the development of the receiver room before July. And, I think for a variety of reasons, many self-inflicted, that Zach Smith has kind of become the whipping boy and the source of all blame of all things Ohio State the last 12 months. But Zach Smith recruited a lot of these guys and coached a lot of these guys for the vast majority of their careers at Ohio State. So I think you have to give him some credit for this too. I don't think I'm out of line saying that. I think people that think that, it was just a flick of a switch that, and now Zach's out and Hartline's in and then everything just came together. I think that's a little disingenuous. I think that's what people want to believe because of their perceptions of Zach and how they feel about how all that whole situation went. But yeah, I don't know that we can just completely put this in the, Zach was a terrible receivers coach and now that he's gone, Hartline just did a miracle job here. I think both guys actually get credit for this receiver room. I don't know. I could be off the reservation on that one, but I just find it hard to play the Zach Smith's gone card.
Yeah, I agree. I was curious what you thought about that because I also agree. I don't necessarily think that it's as easy as saying, well, this is because of Brian Hartline being in there and Zach Smith being out. Maybe Hartline was able to get through and communicate a little bit better. He's done a really good job, but, and maybe that's part of it. But I don't think, especially when it comes to just simple development and X's and O's and scheme and coaching guys up with fundamentals, I don't think that there's probably going to be that much of a difference between the two.
No, I would tend to agree. I mean, like I said, I love what Hartline's doing right now, recruiting, and certainly his room was a major strength of the team. So I'm not trying to take away from him. I just think it's so easy to everything else kind of has been put at Zach Smith's feet that's went wrong with Ohio State since June or whatever, that I just think this is people just getting lazy and just kind of, it's Zach Smith's fault. I don't know. I think there's a lot that goes into it. I think, like I said, I think a little bit more of a receiver friendly quarterback. I think a little bit more of a tweaked scheme, which I think, Ryan Day, if anybody, maybe gets a lot of credit for that. I think we saw a little bit more of Ryan Day's imprint on the offense this year.
Speaking of easier to believe, we saw Mike Weber be, again, not shockingly, especially after we saw him last year, he ran one of the fastest 40 times for running backs at the combine this weekend, which asks it begs the question, what happened to him this year? And I actually do believe, and maybe this is just wishful thinking, I don't know. I actually think that he was just hurt the entire year. And I don't think we saw a completely healthy Mike Weber because we certainly didn't see the kind of burst we saw last year. And after he runs these 40 times, you kind of wonder if he was just, having a bum wheel. And I know there are some other issues, maybe the backs weren't, hitting holes very well. Maybe the line wasn't blocking very well. There could be a number of additional things in this mix, But was Mike Weber carrying an additional load because of injury all year?
I mean, I think that's been his problem here for 3 years now. I mean, he's just, gosh, I think all four. I think part of the reason he redshirted was I think he was banged up. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think at times he's not been healthy. Now, if you look at the numbers, he averaged about a full yard per carry more than Dobbins. I mean, Dobbins had the big step back this year. Weber was a little bit step back. Dobbins had the huge step back this year. So both of them kind of did not perform. And look, the running game was a mess for a while. And they figured it out a little bit towards the end. I think things got better. But everyone's numbers suffered. The entire, Dobbins, gosh, was what was it, like 2 yards a carry less than, I mean, Dobbins fell off a cliff
this
year. Weber was the more productive back. So I think a lot goes into this. With Dobbins specifically, I thought it was more obvious that the lack of holes at the beginning of the season by the offensive line, I thought got in Dobbins' head and made him dance a little bit more. I think you probably argue it happened to Weber too. I think almost like a golfer getting the yips a little bit. I think they just I think there was a phase where it was hard for them to kind of trust their reads, and it looked obvious to me more so with Dobbins and Weber, but their numbers were both definitely down. So yeah, I think part of it with Weber certainly was he's just not been able to be fully healthy for a prolonged stretch of time, and I thought the other part of it was Ohio State had not been able to figure out their running game right away.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because Ross, in conversations with him throughout the year in our weekly recaps, I mean, he said several times he thought both Weber and Dobbins were looking to bounce it out off tackle, too many times. When if they were, patient, and just wait another half a second, the hole was there. He felt at times to just hit it straight up the middle, but he felt that they were both trying to bounce it out a little too much.
Yeah. The Big Ten championship game, to me, there were a lot of, I thought they stabilized things towards the end of the year, but then like the Big Ten championship game, there were some big holes missed, and there were a few instances throughout the year, and it got, like I said, I thought it got better towards the end of the year. It kind of reemerged in the Big Ten championship at times, but yeah, it felt like it got into their heads that the holes really weren't there early, and then I thought they probably were there later, but by that time they were just, it kind of got, like I said, became a mental thing of guys, the patience and the vision and trusting what they were seeing, wasn't always there.
On a spectrum of 2017 J.K. Dobbins to 2018 J.K. Dobbins, what would you more expect to see in 2019 from him?
Probably 17. Full disclosure, I'm a huge fan of J.K. Dobbins, the person. So I just think he's an excellent human being with great talent and character, and also just the way I just think he's a hard worker. I think there will be a motivation and a maturity and a learning that happens here the next 6 months to get ready for a bounce back season. Ross may give you a more X's and O's explanation on that than I would in terms of why I feel the way I feel. I just know JK, and I can't imagine he was happy with the way the year went from an individual standpoint. And it's never going to be a work ethic or a character thing with him. So I just think he's going to go. I think he goes back to the drawing board, and I think the coaching staff will do a better job getting the running game going earlier than this past year when everything was kind of a mess for a little bit there. So I would lean the direction of optimism.
This weekend, Nick Bosa, to no one's surprise, had a pretty good showing. He didn't have a great 40 time, but a great 10-yard time, the 3-cone shuttle. Some of the other things that I think probably measure a little bit more favorably for defensive ends, he did really well in. Of course, Rashawn Gary had an insane 40 time for a guy of his size, but nobody questions his athleticism. Is there any way, because there's talk now that Nick Bosa could fall out of the top 3, which just seems insane to me. Do you see that happening? I just can't see it, why anybody in those top couple picks would not take him. But there are some mock drafts out there that'll tell you he may not go till 4 or 5.
It would be hard for me to envision, even with this is an extraordinary defensive line class. It could be the best defensive line class we've seen in a really long time, and we'll see for a really. There's 7 or 8 difference makers.
Yeah.
So if there were conditions for Nick to drop out of the top 3, I guess it would be a year where there were this many good defensive linemen, and you still had a quarterback or 2 that could go up there. And he's coming off the injury. Which I know he says he feels great right now, and all evidence is that he does, but those things can kind of linger still. So I guess if there were conditions for that to happen, the right conditions are starting to come together, but it's hard for me to envision. He's just so productive, even just a few games. The production he put up in the few games he played this year, given how many actual minutes and snaps he actually played, was just outrageous. Just outrageous.
I didn't see how the year finished, but at one point, like late in the year, he still had more sacks than Rashawn Gary did.
I think he ended up with more.
I think he did. Yeah, I think so.
He got him by like half a sack or something.
Yeah,
I think he did. But the crazy thing is, he was only playing like half of the games.
Yeah,
he wasn't playing they weren't now obviously competition. It wasn't the best part of their schedule, but it's really hard for me to believe. The 40 times laughable. I laughed at it last year when everyone was making fun of Sam. Remember, everyone last year was making fun of Sam Hubbard. How painful! People were making comments like, "Well, look how painful that was to watch him run that 40." Well, it was pretty painful on opposing quarterbacks this year to watch him play football.
Yeah.
And Sam had that great short area quickness too. I think Sam had the best, or certainly was top 2 in the short area stuff. And I just laughed at that last year with Sam on the 40. I'm like, geez, you got to be kidding me.
That's why and we do this.
Running 40 yards in a straight line, you have some issues.
But we do this every year. It's like everybody gets all in love or hate the 40 times of these prospects for defensive ends, and it's like that doesn't matter. These guys, their 40 time does not matter with what they have to do on the field. And that's why, like you said, the short bursts and their agility and their quickness, those are the things that matter for these guys. Whether they can run, a long 40 time or a quick 40 time, it doesn't matter. Ask the Bengals like you said, ask the Bengals right now what they think of Sam Hubbard's 40 time.
Oh, steal of the draft, probably. To be honest, I can't imagine there were that many guys drafted as late as Sam was, relatively speaking, that had the impact he had. He had a tremendous year. Yeah, I wouldn't. And it was pointed out on the board today, I guess Nick ran faster than Joey, I think in the 40, right?
Yeah.
I think I'm right on that.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to trust the tape. You just have to trust the tape. You start to overanalyze everything, and I don't know. I think you just have to use the combine as validation. Like if you love a guy, you just want to see him go out there and not totally, hurt himself in terms of the numbers. But if you didn't love a guy on tape, and now all of a sudden you love a guy because he ran a 40 or something, to me that's a bad recipe. I
think some of these numbers are good if you question a guy's competition. If you question, he's dominating, but he didn't play against a very good competition. He didn't play against a lot of guys that are going to be playing on Sundays. I can understand you wanting to use, some of these numbers as a little bit of a supplement to what you can't see on tape. But if you're Ohio State and you're facing a lot of, or if you're in the SEC especially, I guess would be a better example, and you're facing a lot of NFL prospects going up against you, especially offensive or defensive line opposite you, then again, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. You should trust your instincts, trust the tape. I just think some of these numbers are good only when you don't have a lot to go on as far as the tape is concerned.
Right. And even and maybe, okay, so, if you've got a couple of corners out there, and maybe you've got them pretty even on tape. Okay, maybe you go with a guy who's a little bit faster, better athlete, because ultimately speed at corner is pretty important. But these defensive line and linebacker, just go watch the tape. Just go watch. It's not gonna. I just can't fathom changing my opinion on a defensive lineman over a 40 time. I just can't. I don't know.
It's perplexing to me. It really is. It's not that. I mean, and we do the same. We do with we did it with, like you mentioned at the very top. You mentioned the Kyler Murray height. People freaking out about him being 5'10" instead of 5'9". It's like there's just too much emphasis on some of these measurables. They really are. At the end of the day, it comes down to, in my opinion, especially with quarterbacks, but anybody, can you play football? I mean, yes or no? Check the box, yes or no. Can you play football? And if so, then this is a guy you should be wanting to draft. The measurables, I'm not saying they're not important or they don't matter, but I think too much emphasis is placed on them.
Yeah, it's God, like I said, with Murray, it's wild. I mean, he's going to be, if you're going to draft him, he's going to be the shortest starting quarterback in the NFL. Whether he's 5'9" or 5'10" or 5'7" or whatever, he's still going to be the shortest quarterback in the NFL. So you should have either had it in your mind that you didn't care about that and you saw other things that this wasn't going to be a concern, or he should have been off your board because you don't think this can work. I don't see being 5'9" versus 5'10" changes either of those stances. You know what I'm saying? It's bizarre. Now, if you think a guy's 5'10" and he's 6'2", I mean, that could change something. But there's so much information out there now that none of this stuff should be a huge surprise. You know what I'm saying? Like you said with the small school kids, maybe, but nothing. Paris Campbell's fast. Newsflash. Did we really need to watch him run 4.31 to know that Paris Campbell's fast? I mean, did you really need to see that? There's so much info out there now. Everyone's on national TV. You get the tape. There's so much high school. There's huddle film. You go back and watch his high school tapes. I mean, there's so much information now that it just shouldn't be. We shouldn't have these overreactions anymore. I get it 30 years ago when we didn't have all this information at our fingertips. It's, maybe you were seeing these guys for the first time and whatever, but this stuff really shouldn't be that surprising at this point. These guys work year round on this stuff now, and it's just, if anything, it should be validation of what you previously thought.
Well, so real quick here before we wrap it up, I do want to talk just one element of recruiting, in that you posted a really extensive visit list as spring practice is getting ready to start here at Ohio State, and over on Buckeye Grove on the Horseshoe Lounge, you posted an extensive visit list. So for those that are not Buckeye Grove members, and what are you waiting for? Please join us. Give us a synopsis here and the highlights of what Ohio State fans should expect in the way of visits coming up here this spring.
Yeah, and even I put that. That's really my first draft. There will be dozens of additions to this in the probably by the end of the week, but certainly in the coming weeks. But if we could point to two or three things here, I think. First thing, kind of going in chronological order, Saturday, March 23rd is going to be a big spring scrimmage for Ohio State, which I don't believe will be open to the media. Historically, these have not been. But, to be honest with you, these types of things are more important than the spring game. The spring game at this point has turned into just an exhibition for the fans. Yeah. These Saturday closed scrimmages get pretty competitive, and I think a lot of decisions get made off of this. But with that in mind, that's going to be that Saturday, March 23rd is going to be a big recruiting weekend. A lot of these guys are going to be coming in Friday and staying through Saturday, or maybe coming in Saturday and staying through Sunday. But Luke Whippler is going to be on campus, O-line commit, Jack Sawyer, 2021 defensive end commit. So those guys are going to be there. Jack will be there to help with recruiting. Luke probably will as well, but that's obviously important to get him back on campus because there was a little bit of a freak out when Urban Meyer stepped aside. So it's nice to get him back. But Legend Cavazos is going to be back. Obviously, they still got a chance to bring him back in, so that's a big visit. J.J. McCarthy, a 2021 quarterback out of Illinois, who's got an offer and visited in the fall. Very, very high on Ohio State. I think Ohio State leads right now. He's going to be there. Henry Gray, top 100 defensive back out of Miami Central High School, one of their top defensive back targets. He's coming up. He's talked the talk about Ohio State for a year now. He's about to visit. That's a big one. So those are just some of the names. That list will expand greatly. That's going to be a big visit weekend. Kind of moving down, and this I think we even talked about this on the podcast before. This has been set for a while, but April 4th, five-star running back Kendall Milton is scheduled to start what is expected to be a 4-day visit in Columbus, and he's coming in between that March 23rd scrimmage and the spring game on April 13th. So it's going to be in one of those, I don't want to say dead areas because they will have other guys on campus during this time, but it's going to be one of those areas where there's not, 50 guys on campus. So it's going to be a very intimate, they're going to be able to really put a lot of energy and attention into him. He's going to be here for 4 days. That's a really big visit. That's going to help dictate, obviously Bijan Robinson's another guy, but him and Milton are going to dictate a lot of how this running back class and how this running back search goes. And then obviously April 13th is the spring game. That I haven't worried about too much. Just threw a few names on there that have already told me or told one of our guys in our network that they're coming. So it's not really an extensive list yet. It will be a huge list by the time we get there, but just LV Bunkley Shelton, top 100 receiver out of California, top 100 receiver Marcus Rosemy out of St. Thomas Aquinas, and top 100 offensive lineman Turner Corcoran out of Lawrence, Kansas are all in for that. So those are three of the best 100 players in the country, priority guys, big visits there for all of them. So that's just a little bit of what there is to look forward to here the next 6 weeks. It's going to be, I think it's going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, as you said, that this is just a preliminary list, and there's still plenty of time with spring just starting up. So we've got 6 weeks where we could see a lot more names, continue to grow this list. So really exciting stuff. I mentioned this early in the week, and I will say it again one more time. I am actually looking into the idea of doing a live remote podcast from the spring game on April 13th. So that is something that'll be really exciting if I can pull it off, but I'll have more details if I am able to get that set up. So that should be a lot of fun. Mark, it was a pleasure as always, and we look forward to the next several weeks, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of 2020 and 2021 recruiting updates from you.
Yep, absolutely.
That's going to wrap it up for the Unscripted Ohio podcast today. Of course, you can catch us every Monday and Friday on BuckeyeGrove.com, and on Wednesdays you can catch Corey and Johnny with the Scarlet and Great podcast as well. Catch me on Twitter at KYLam8. You can catch Mark at MarkGiblerBG, and also you can listen to the show on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Spotify. That is going to wrap it up. We will be back with you again on Friday. Hope everybody has a great week.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.